Hi, everybody. It's Diane at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Thanks for joining the United for Homes endorser webinar. I think we'll give it maybe just one more minute because we still have people joining, and then we'll get started. Everybody, this is Diane Yantel from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Welcome to the first United for Homes endorser call in 2017. We're excited to get started, to get back to work, and we're so glad you're all able to join us today. I think 2017 in many years is going to be a very consequential year, and we certainly have a lot of work to do and a lot of work ahead. So it's really an exciting time for the United for Homes campaign. Our goals are within reach. I think, this is really our moment to achieve what United for Homes first set out to do several years ago, to rebalance federal housing policy and to ensure a significant investment in rental housing solutions that serve the lowest income people in programs like the National Housing Trust Fund. So today we're going to talk a bit about the campaign. I'll give an overview. We'll talk about the need, the solution, the opportunities that are in front of us, both immediate opportunities and long-term opportunities. We'll talk about some new messaging and tools that we've created for our advocacy work. And we'll talk about immediate next steps, what you can do to take action. And then we'll be sure to leave some time for some questions. So I have on the call, on the webinar with me today, Andrew Arend, who's our Vice President of Research, Renee Willis, Vice President for Communications and Field, and Joey Lindstrom, Manager of Field Organizing. And in the room, we have just about the entire NLIHC staff. That's how excited and committed we are to this campaign. So we'll start a little bit about the overview. And of course, this webinar today is for endorsers of United for Homes. So many of you are very familiar with the campaign and with our goals. But we have taken the last few months to kind of rethink the strategy, what our most successful strategy can be. And with that strategy in mind, we've refreshed some of our key messages. So we'll walk through some of that today when we talk about the campaign. So United for Homes is a national effort to rebalance federal housing policy by making modest changes to the mortgage interest deduction, to provide tax relief to more low and moderate income homeowners, and invest the significant savings into programs that ensure the lowest income people in the United States, including those who are homeless, can have decent, affordable homes. So this has always been the core of the United for Homes message, but you'll notice a few things about how we've kind of shifted and amplified some parts of the message. So you'll see the part about how United for Homes, the changes that we're proposing to the MID will provide tax relief to more low and moderate income homeowners. So this has always been the case in the United for Homes campaign and in our proposals, but we're very purposefully taking that part of the proposal and putting it kind of front and center as a way to really expand our allies and our partners and increase the likelihood of success in doing so. Also, we talk here about putting the savings into programs that ensure that the lowest income people have decent, safe, and affordable homes. This has also always been part of the campaign. Previously, we really highlighted the National Housing Trust Fund as the key solution We will continue to highlight it as a key solution and also recognize some of the other programs that would get to the same end goal of ensuring that the lowest income people are housed affordably. So including programs like rental assistance programs, like the Section 8 voucher program, or potentially a renter's tax credit that's deeply targeted. Again, I think this is to expand both our coalition and our chances of success. So we're starting 2017 in a very strong position. We have over 2,300 organizations and elected officials that have endorsed. We have endorsers in every congressional district. So we have this incredibly strong foundation from which we can build even more of a network that's prepared to mobilize as needed. So we'll be laying out in our messaging kind of as clearly and as concisely as we can what our problem statement is. And essentially, the problem is that there is a shortage of homes that are affordable and available to the lowest income people. That has resulted in homelessness and housing poverty. It's primarily because we are underfunding, severely underfunding programs that can help with this issue. And that is primarily because we spend our federal housing dollars in an inequitable manner. We spend much more of it to subsidize higher income homeowners than we do low income renters. So our refreshed campaign that we're getting started on again today, as you can see, reframe some of the issues so that they resonate with and ideally attract some new allies and partners in our cause, where we're presenting some of the key messages of the campaign in really a clear, easy to understand fashion, and we'll be providing robust tools to expand the support and galvanize action by supporters, and we'll talk about some of those tools today. So the messaging, as some of this I've touched on, is the key message is that United for Homes seeks to end homelessness, build a strong foundation, and strengthen communities by providing tax relief to more low and moderate income homeowners and increasing federal investments in the rental housing solutions for the lowest income people, such as the National Housing Trust Fund and rental assistance programs. And we can make those investments by reforming the mortgage interest deduction and reinvesting those savings in housing solutions that assist people with the greatest needs. We are going to be working hard over the next couple of years with all of your help to create new alliances, to really build off of some of the work that we've done to develop cross-sector partnerships and in the housing sector, in the health sector, in the education sector, people who care about economic mobility or communities or jobs. So you'll see in our integrated approach some of these messages, and this is really building off of the work that our community, the housing community, has done, the real progress that we've made in really very clearly showing and even quantifying the links between housing and health, housing and education, housing and economic mobility, and making the case for the benefits that are realized in all of these other sectors when we invest in affordable rental housing. So I'll turn it over now to Andrew to talk a bit about the scope of the need for affordable rental housing.
Oh, thanks, Diane. As Diane had just briefly mentioned earlier, and as many of you know, there's currently a shortage of about 7.2 million affordable homes that are available to the poorest renters, and those are renters who earn less than 30% of the area median income. That's only 31 affordable and available rental homes for every 100 extremely low income households. And on the next slide, which is a map, you'll see that it provides the number of affordable and available rental homes for every 100 extremely low-income renter households by state. And the supply is as low as 17 affordable homes for 100 renters in Nevada, 21 in California, Arizona, and Alaska, and even the state with the best relative supply is North Dakota, where there's only 64 housing units that are affordable and available for every 100 renters. In no state or metropolitan area, or every state and every major metropolitan area has a shortage of housing for the poorest renters. As a result, 7.8 million extremely low-income households are severely cost-burdened, spending more than half of their income on rent. Keep in mind there's only 10.4 million extremely low-income renter households. So that means 3/4 of them are severely cost-burdened. And they make up 3/4 of all severely cost-burdened households in the country. And as you can see, there's far fewer households with these severe cost burdens as you move up the income ladder to low income and moderate income. The next slide that you're looking at illustrates some of our federal housing expenditures. The top line, the blue line, represents approximately $70 billion a year, approximately, that is expended for the mortgage interest deduction that allows homeowners to deduct the interest they pay on their mortgage from their income for federal tax purposes. By comparison, HUD's annual budget authority is the orange line, which is typically a little more than $40 billion per year, and that's the entire HUD budget. So, as you can see just from this simple graph here, is that we spend far less on federal housing programs that help poor households than we do on the mortgage interest deduction, that most 82% of which goes to higher income households who earn more than $100,000. And on the next slide, it shows the average benefit of the mortgage interest deduction by income group. And so you can see as income goes up, the average benefit of the mortgage interest deduction goes up it's quite dramatic. And that is because, one, higher income households earn a higher marginal tax rate, so the value of their deduction is greater to them, and two, they have larger mortgages, and so they often will pay more in interest. And this I should also point out, this slide says nothing about the fact that many lower to moderate income homeowners don't benefit at all from the mortgage interest deduction because they don't itemize their deductions. So in summary of these 4 slides, is that we have a huge shortage of affordable housing for the poorest households who have the most critical cost burdens, and yet we devote fewer housing resources for those households than we do to the mortgage interest deduction. And I'll turn it back over to Diane.
Great, thanks. So next slide, please. So the solution is essentially the next one is the United for Homes proposal, which is to reform the mortgage interest deduction, which is a $70 billion a year tax write-off that, as Andrew said, largely benefits the highest income households, and make these changes so that we can provide tax relief to more low and moderate income households and reinvest the significant savings into rental housing that serves the families with the greatest needs. Specifically, our proposals are as they have been since United for Homes was created. There are 3 components to the solution. One is to lower the mortgage cap, so reduce the amount of a mortgage eligible for a tax write-off from its current cap of $1 million down to $500,000. So homes that have a mortgage of $600,000 or $700,000, they will still be able to get the benefit of the interest up to $500,000. And we have looked at the data to see how many people across the country would be impacted by this proposal. And it turns out that it would be fewer than 6% of mortgage holders around the country that would have any impact at all from this change. And that 6% of households are mostly in California and New York and a few other high-cost areas around the country, but predominantly New York and California. So the second proposal is to convert the deduction to a tax credit. So turn the mortgage interest deduction into a credit. This is the place where we would realize a new tax benefit for millions of low-income homeowners who currently get none from holding a mortgage. These are homeowners who don't earn enough to itemize their tax returns, and so get no benefit from the mortgage interest deduction. Changing it from a deduction to a tax credit would mean 15 million more low and moderate income homeowners get a tax break. And then finally, we would take the savings and put it into rental housing programs. So these two changes alone would generate $241 billion in savings over 10 years. And we propose that those dollars be reinvested into the housing programs that serve the lowest income people. So the opportunities. If there's one message that you take from this webinar, I hope it's this, and that is that tax reform is happening and reforms to the mortgage interest deduction are on the table. And this creates for us a tremendous opportunity to realize the goals of the United for Homes campaign. So for years, for many years, any idea of reforming the mortgage interest deduction was considered a third rail, and it was just untouchable. That has changed pretty significantly in recent years. We've seen a number of bipartisan proposals that have been put forward around tax reform that have proposed changes to the mortgage interest deduction. And thanks to the work of everybody on this call and the United for Homes campaign and others, the conversation has shifted. And today we are seeing that evidenced by Speaker Paul Ryan and his A Better Way tax reform proposal that very clearly opens a window to the possibility of mortgage interest deduction reform. We've seen the likely incoming new Treasury Secretary, Mnuchin, one of his first kind of press avails, he said, "Oh yeah, we're probably going to lower that cap from $1 million down." He's since kind of been a little bit more careful with what he's been saying publicly, but we've been meeting with Ways and Means and Senate Finance members and their staff, and they are confirming for us that there are active conversations happening now about reforms to the mortgage interest deduction. So that's great news. That's a huge opportunity. We still have our work cut out for us, and there remains a huge hill to climb, and that is to make sure that we retain any of the savings from changes to the mortgage interest deduction, whether changes made to it directly or indirectly through an increase to the standard deduction, and we make sure that some or all of that money stays within affordable housing programs. The much more likely possibility, if we don't do this work, and certainly the intentions of people like Speaker Paul Ryan and others who have talked about these changes to MID, are to use the savings and pay for lowered corporate tax rates or an increased standard deduction or lowered deficit. So the real work that we have to do is to make strongly the case that these dollars that are used for housing stay within housing and are more deeply targeted for those with the greatest need. So I think it's also a tremendous opportunity, kind of just the fact that MID is being considered and that our biggest obstacle is keeping it within housing programs. It's an opportunity for us to reach out to all of those groups, whether they're housing groups or others, who have been, who are either don't want to see changes to the mortgage interest deduction, or who just haven't wanted to get involved in that fight of whether or not we should reform MID, to say, we don't necessarily have to debate that. What we can do now is all agree that if and when changes to the MID are made, that we're united in our message that those dollars have to stay within affordable housing programs. So to that end, Representative Keith Ellison from Minnesota, who is a longtime champion of the a longtime friend to the United for Homes campaign, a longtime champion for affordable housing generally, and reforming the MID for these purposes specifically, is releasing today a Dear Colleague letter. And that's where a Dear Colleague letter is kind of a DC term for when a congressperson asks their colleagues, other representatives, to join them in making an ask. And in this case, he is asking the other representatives in the House to join him in a letter ensuring that the savings from any changes to the tax benefits are redirected to rental housing programs for low-income families. So we have on the call today Carol Wayman, who is also a longtime champion of affordable housing generally, and this proposal specifically, both before she was in Congressman Ellison's office and certainly has been leading the cause within Congressman Keith Ellison's office. So Carol, I'm just going to turn it over to you to see if you want to say a few words about your boss's efforts and about the Dear Colleague letter. And we're all keeping our fingers crossed that the technology works out here, because I know, Carol, you're on the call. Carol, there you are. Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diane, and thanks everybody for what a great turnout and your real commitment to affordable rental housing. Keith, my remarks are on my behalf, and I don't represent what the Congressman has to say, but I will say that Congressman Ellison is a huge fan of your work and really extensive organizing and education that this coalition, the United for Homes campaign, has done over the last, I guess, almost 5 years now. Keith, Mr. Ellison has introduced more than half a dozen bills on expanding the supply of affordable rental housing and better meeting the housing needs. People know he has this Common Sense Housing Investment Act, which takes a lot of these recommendations from the campaign into a bill. Last year it was H.R. 1662, and he plans to introduce it next month. Very much along the same lines with expansion to support rental assistance programs. So appreciate everybody's commitment there. The first time he introduced this bill, we had 15 co-sponsors. Last Congress, we only had 6. So that's an opportunity for more education and getting a nice list of co-sponsors when we reintroduce. And then, as Diane mentioned today, we did send out a Dear Colleague to every member of the House, asking them to sign a letter supporting taking any changes that come from the mortgage interest deduction, changes in terms of expanded revenue, and making sure that it's dedicated wholly to expanding the supply of affordable rental housing. The letter is led by Congressman Ellison and also Congresswoman Gwen Moore from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so far we've added Mr. Jeffries.
All right.
Hakeem Jeffries. So we're off and running. And
that's great.
That's all I've got to say. So thanks, everybody. And we're going to ideally close the letter on January 27th.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Thanks so much for taking the time to join our call today. We're really excited about this letter, and we're gonna work with all of our endorsers to try to increase the number of people signing on to support your boss's work. So thanks so much. And to that end, folks on the call, you'll be hearing more in a bit from Joey, and then we'll be following up with some information through email about what you can do to support Keith Ellison's efforts. So I will turn it over now to Renee to talk about some of the amazing new tools that she and her team have been creating for the campaign.
Hi, thank you, Diane. Hi, everyone, and thanks for being on this call. We're really excited about the relaunch of the United for Homes campaign. And now that you've heard about the problem, the solution, the opportunities, we really are excited to share with you some tools that we've developed to help spread the United for Homes message. As Diane mentioned earlier, we have been working on reframing or framing our proposal in a way that resonates with and attracts new allies. We have also worked to provide new tools that can be used in the field to increase support for the campaign and to galvanize action by supporters. So as far as tools, we're working on videos. We're working on a series of videos that will visually explain and educate to the general community and policymakers on the need of affordable housing, policy reform, and how appropriate reform will impact millions of lives for the better. So the first video that we've created will really just will show what federal housing policy looks like today, and will incorporate different viewpoints that lead back to the need for reform. And then the second video that we're working on, it's an animated video that explains the nationwide shortage of affordable housing and how the campaign proposal will help to end homelessness in America. We're also working on a media kit that we will send to you in the coming weeks. And it's a media kit that will help you to spread and to amplify the United for Homes message. in your state and community. We'll have a media training on February the 8th at 2 p.m. You'll receive additional information about this webinar, but it will be the opportunity. We'll walk you through the media kit, and we'll share with you some sample tweets and things that you can do in social media as well as traditional media. We've also been working on our collateral and retooling, revamping, and updating all the United for Homes collateral. So for instance, we'll have fact sheets, a new sign-on form, state-specific fact sheets that will showcase the impact of our proposal in your state. And we're also working on an advocacy tool that will include a script. So when you're meeting with your members of Congress or calling your members of Congress, you'll have some information in which to refer. And also, too, one of the last tools that we're working on a new website, which we will be launching in early February. And the website will really it has a lot of resources. So it will have a blog, a news section, a lot of information in terms of social media, curated wall, and some additional information for you as well. So what we would like to do is to preview this website with you today. And we'll just walk you through, I'll just walk you through the home page for the website. All right, so what you see on the screen now, we have the United for Homes, the information, and you will have 3 take action buttons there. We're really excited about this because we want to make it as easy as possible for folks to take part in the campaign, and to be able to connect with their members of Congress as easily as possible. So as you go down, as you scroll, see if we can get this technology to work here. Okay, so as you scroll, you will come to what the United for Homes campaign is about, and you'll see the problem statement as well. So we have some icons here. So if you scroll over these icons, this information here will change to let you know what the problem is and what the shortage, in this case, what the shortage of affordable housing is. This will be where we'll have the videos that I talked about. We'll showcase our videos, and again, we are working on a series of videos. Again, getting to our solution that Diane talked about a little bit earlier. This will highlight what the solution is, as well as provide folks with what our proposal is in action. So this is a way, it's a slider, so that if folks want to see how the proposal will work, they can move the slider to lower the mortgage cap or to convert to a tax credit. And all the information on the right-hand side will change. So you'll see what the impact will be over 10 years. And one of the things that I love about this too is that you'll be able to share the results immediately in your networks via social media, via Twitter and Facebook. And as you scroll down, we also have additional information. So you can click on your state, and once you click on your state, you'll get high-level information about what's happening in the state. So you can see here in Colorado that over the course of 10 years, the impact of the proposal will be a savings of $3.2 billion. That could be used to either create more than 45,000 rental assistants, to create new rental assistants, or to create 32,000 new affordable housing units. And we'll go back to this a little bit later so I can show you, we have more details if you want to really get into the weeds of what is happening in your state. We have more information there. I spoke a little bit earlier about the social media curated wall. This is where anytime anyone is mentioning United for Homes in social media, this is the place where that information will be collected, a curated wall. And this is also a place where folks can share via social media, Twitter, and Facebook information that they see here as well. We will also have a blog section and a news section. So any news about United for Homes, you will find it here in this section. And then any facts on United for Homes we will have here in this section. And we will be updating this regularly. So certainly information will change as we develop new fact sheets and fact cards about the United for Homes campaign. So I mentioned the states. So I wanted to go back to that just for a moment. So once you click on one of the states, you will then access, let's see if we can get this here, information regarding your state. So this is where you will see, again, the impact of what the United for Homes proposal will do in the various states. But you will also have information here such as data on the states, resources, endorsers, and take action. And so I'm going to briefly just preview these with you. So with the data section, you'll see in your state how many mortgages are over 500,000, and in this case in Colorado, it's 3.7%. You'll also see some information and data on out of reach, on how many hours a person would have to work in order to afford a modest 2-bedroom unit at fair market rent. And then you'll also have gap, affordable housing gap information as well. In the tab labeled resources, this is where you will find information and resources that you can use in your advocacy. State-specific resources, as well as all of the reports that we've produced. And also we're creating, as I said, a media kit and some other tools that you can use in your advocacy. In the section, in the tab entitled Endorsers, you'll see all of the endorsers in your state, state organizations, as well as elected officials at the bottom. And then in the last section, we have a take action section. So if anyone is joining or coming to this website, and if they're not a member of the United for Homes campaign, they can certainly join through this take action button, as well as we'll have connections so that you can connect with your members of Congress on various legislation, and also a step where you can also, again, share via social media. So again, this is the website that we intend to premiere in early February. We're very excited about this as a tool to help in advocacy. And I'll certainly be more than happy to answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. But first, I want to turn it over to Joseph Lindstrom, who's going to talk to you about what's next.
All right, thank you, Renee, and thank you everyone for being on the call, of course. This is a really great moment with relaunching the United for Homes campaign, and perhaps a unique opportunity with tax reform really getting moving in Congress. So naturally you're wondering, what can I do to really get involved and to make an impact with my member of Congress? And that's a great question, so glad you asked. The first thing you need to do is, beyond just supporting United for Homes and our efforts to reform the MID, is communicate with your member of Congress that this is an issue that you and your organization care about. We do everything we can, of course, on Capitol Hill, but please do not assume that once you've endorsed the campaign, NLIHC and other national groups will carry the message, because I promise that members of Congress prefer hearing from you, the constituents, more so than us here in DC. I can also promise you that the National Association of Realtors and other real estate interests and lobbies have been mobilizing their members to prevent any meaningful MID reform from taking place. And this happens whenever we see members of Congress make positive statements about reforming MID. They get a ton of phone calls and emails and meetings from realtors in their district, and we need to respond to that with housing advocates who feel that housing resources need to be provided in a more balanced fashion. In order to speak to your members of Congress about these issues, there are numerous ways you can be in touch. We will be sending out a call to action related to Representative Ellison's Dear Colleague letter that Carol Wayman was speaking about earlier on the webinar. We will also be providing opportunities for each of you to lobby at NLIHC's annual forum and lobby day in April. So please consider attending that event. And also know that you have opportunities to communicate with your members of Congress publicly through blogs, newsletters, social media, and letters to the editor, all of which we have examples that we can provide for you. The actual ask in Congress right now in the House is focused on Representative Ellison's Dear Colleague letter. We'd like to see as many representatives as possible signing on to that letter, and as Diane mentioned earlier, this right now is a bit of a simpler ask. And perhaps the most important ask as well, which is if MID reform happens, we need to keep the funding in housing programs, specifically those that benefit people with the greatest needs. It doesn't necessarily, this letter, urge reforming the MID, but says the money from any possible reform needs to be kept in housing. This is a really important argument that we need to reinforce, and we can do that by getting lots of representatives on this initial letter. We do expect that at some point in this legislative session, we will have a bill in the House from one of our champions, perhaps Representative Ellison or another former supporter of the Common Sense Housing Investment Act. And what bill we see introduced in the House will largely be similar to what you've seen in the previous two Congresses, with perhaps some changes. When that occurs, we will make sure to be in touch with all of you through another call to action and another set of talking points that you can use to be in touch with your member of Congress. Remember that building support for this idea matters well beyond any particular bill passing, because when we have, whether it's through a Dear Colleague letter or co-sponsors to a piece of legislation, what we can present is momentum building around an idea. Very often when change happens legislatively, it's not because a bill passes, but that a larger package passes and it includes within it several other smaller ideas and smaller pieces of legislation. Indeed, this happened with the original National Housing Trust Fund bill, which never passed on its own, but rather passed when the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008 moved through Congress, and they folded in what at that time was a popular idea. What we need to do with MID reform is make it this popular idea so that as tax reform more broadly moves forward in Congress, this is included as an essential element. Additional ways for you to take action is to spread the word about the campaign and to recruit others to be involved. Use social media, use your newsletters, use your blogs to share United for Homes information in your network. You can do that with today's call to action on Representative Ellison's Dear Colleague letter. You can do that when we release the new website in the beginning of February, but make sure that those advocates who are in your network are hearing about the campaign and knowing that they too can take action. For any of these materials, we will provide samples, and we do have other organizations who have done similar efforts. So if you want to put something in your print newsletter or publish an article on your blog, or if you'd like some sample tweets, all you need to do is get in touch with us here at NLIHC, and we can provide those samples for you so that promoting United for Homes isn't a labor-intensive effort on your part. Do also continue to ask your state and local government officials to endorse the United for Homes campaign. Very often, elected officials carry a lot of clout in meetings with higher up elected officials. We do have, I believe it's 7 cities throughout the country that have passed resolutions in support of United for Homes, ranging from Seattle to Cleveland to Minneapolis to Milwaukee and various others. And we would like to see more and more mayors, more and more state and local legislators signing on to the campaign. Additionally, the new website will provide for the first time opportunities for individuals to add their names as supporters of the United for Homes campaign. Up until now, it's really just been organizations and elected officials in local governments. This will now, I think, give a lot of people opportunities as individuals to plug into the campaign, receive the updates, participate in the monthly calls. But we still encourage you to get as many organizational endorsements out of your community as possible. In order to be effective in recruiting others, please know and use the field team here at NLIHC. There are 3 of us organizers who can really help be the liaisons for you in making any of this material as effective as possible and making it as easy for you to use as possible. The final thing you can do as we move forward is really just stay informed. attend monthly United for Homes endorser meetings, which will be updates that we expect will be coming somewhat rapidly as Congress continues its new session. And we will be doing these the second Tuesday of each month. For example, the next one being February 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. As Diane mentioned earlier, tax reform looks like it's happening and it looks like it's moving, and we should have a lot of fresh information on these calls. But we hope that these calls will not be just a one-way sort of conduit of information where we provide updates. We're also going to be interested in what you're hearing from the field as you were talking to your stakeholders in your community about being involved in the campaign, and as you're talking to your members of Congress and hearing their questions and concerns about supporting these ideas in Congress. That's all I have. I think I'll turn it over to Diane to finish it out.
Sure, thanks, Joey. Well, actually, now we do want to hear from you. So we've got some time to hear your questions or your comments about anything you've heard today or anything that's on your mind related to the United for Homes campaign.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. This is James Saucedo, one of the organizers on the field team. So, folks, if you want to type any questions that you've got into the question box in the webinar platform, we'll go ahead and get to those in the last few minutes of the hour that we've got today. We have one question so far. Ann Gass is commenting on a question of affordability. And sort of, so her question is, so is the Unite for Homes campaign advocating that the new affordable rental housing developed using these funds, the funds that we gained through the tax reform that we advocate for, do we advocate that those homes or those funds be, the homes created with those funds be permanently affordable?
Oh, yeah, so that's a great question, Ann. Thank you. We tend in our messaging to focus most on the programs that we think could be funded with the dollars saved through MID reform. And so we highlight the National Housing Trust Fund program and other programs that are deeply targeted that would serve the lowest income people. So maybe rental assistance programs like the Section 8 voucher program, or potentially a renter's tax credit, which doesn't exist yet, but there will be some efforts to create one, and there's an additional opportunity to achieve that through tax reform. So I think we haven't in the campaign itself and in our messaging about what we want the solutions to be, sort of laid out beyond saying it should fund solutions for the lowest income people so that they have decent, safe, and affordable homes. We haven't focused on specifics to say the homes should be permanently affordable, long-term affordable, or different types of funding that could go into those. But the programs that we are highlighting are ones through the National Housing Trust Fund where there certainly is long-term affordability, and on the rental assistance side where that wouldn't quite apply in the same way.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you, Diane. I'm going to let you. Okay. One question from Sarah. Why do you think that more experts are calling for MID reform? What's changed?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sarah. I think that for a long time, there have been many experts who have said that the mortgage interest deduction doesn't make sense as a policy or as something that we should be funding with federal dollars. Economists have said that for decades and continue to. So I think part of what happened that made the support for the mortgage interest deduction so strong for so long is this kind of mythology that was built up around the mortgage interest deduction. This mythology that was really pretty successful, that was put forward to say that mortgage interest deduction increases home ownership, or and it ties into the whole kind of home ownership is like mom and apple pie, and it's an American value that we should support, and MID is the way that we get there. And that's another place where I think most economists agree that mythology is just that. It's myths. It's not actually true that the mortgage interest deduction doesn't actually incentivize home ownership, that it doesn't certainly help lower income people who want to become homeowners to do that. It's an extremely regressive use of tax dollars, kind of an on and on. So I think those arguments have been there for a long time, but the industry groups like the home builders and the realtors have really pushed that mythology hard as a way to keep anybody from even considering changes to the mortgage interest deduction. And then I think we started seeing maybe like 10 years ago where there have been bipartisan efforts to start talking about comprehensively reforming the tax code for the first time since 1986. And I think as those conversations have progressed, the mortgage interest deduction always pops up because it's one of the most expensive tax expenditures in the tax code, and because it's hard to kind of defend it. It's a good use of tax dollars, such an expensive tax break, when you start to break down those myths around it. So I think it's been kind of a convergence of expert opinions that have been around for a long time and this desire to reform the tax code that it keeps popping up as something that has to be dealt with in some way.
Great, thanks so much, Diane. We have quite a few questions. We're going to try to get to all of them. One from Bob Palmer. Is there a possible alliance to be made with realtors and others who are concerned about the MID being totally eliminated?
Yeah, I think there is, Bob, exactly. And I think the fact that, so one of the ways, I think there's a concern that MID may be eliminated. I think there's an even more kind of immediate and maybe more likely concern that those groups have that the MID becomes not needed if the standard deduction is increased to the extent that at least the House Ways and Means Committee is considering. And then it just sort of becomes moot. And that one has been a harder argument, I think, for the realtors and the home builders to be able to defend the mortgage interest deduction, because increasing the standard deduction means more money in people's pockets to decide how they want to use those extra dollars, maybe to buy a home, maybe for other purposes. So I think in that, especially with that being a very real threat, I think this opportunity to unite around a message of let's make sure that housing dollars stay within housing programs is really possible and necessary. Because I think all of those groups don't want to see dollars used for housing used for other purposes, especially all of us agree, including certainly home builders and realtors, that there's an affordable housing crisis that needs solutions. So I do think it's a real opportunity, this moment right now, and the fact that the changes to the MID that are being considered are really a very real threat to those groups, that we could potentially find common ground in fighting to keep those dollars in housing programs.
Great, thank you. So we've got another question from Chip Halbach. Can you say a little bit more about the level of credit home buyers would receive? So for instance, the percentage, the base in terms of interest paid, and then any other considerations, particularly if there's any change from the previous United for Homes proposal.
Sure, the changes, and I should say it's a great question. Thanks, Chip, and thanks for being on. The changes to United for Homes have really just been around the messaging and kind of expanding the tent and expanding the number of allies. The solutions that we put forward are essentially the same, they are exactly the same on reforms to the mortgage interest deduction. And I will say that those changes, we've always put them out as what we think are the most possible, the most beneficial changes. They're the ones that we've really studied what would be the impact, both across the country for number of homeowners impacted positively or negatively, how much money would be realized. But we've also said that we're not necessarily married to these changes alone. There's other ways to get to the same solutions within when we start talking about reforming the mortgage interest deduction, especially when we talk about changing it from a deduction to a credit, as you're asking. So we put out there as a way to kind of measure the impacts, changing it from a deduction to a non-refundable capped credit up to 15% of interest. that's, you know, and I think we've seen in recent years, we've seen proposals like that put forward by members of Congress, by bipartisan sort of thinking group or bipartisan proposals. We've seen like the percentage maybe shifted. It could be up to 20%. It could be 10%. I think that's all. If we can get to a point where that's what we're actually debating, we'll be in a terrific place.
Great. Another question from Sarah. Are you working with more conservative groups to push for MID reforms? And should we be reaching out to conservative-leaning organizations like some faith-based groups in our communities?
Yeah, anything you can do on that. I'll turn to Joey in a second for his thoughts on local advocacy and organizing. But on the conservative groups, we've certainly been thinking about that. The video that Renee mentioned is going to feature Mark Calabria from the Cato Institute. He's somebody who's been a long-time advocate for reforms to, if not elimination, of the mortgage interest deduction. So we're definitely thinking about kind of the maybe strange bedfellows kind of alliances that we can create, whether with Cato Institute, with the American Enterprise Institute, a number of very conservative groups that have been strong proponents of changes to the mortgage interest deduction in the past. Joe, you want to say something about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that would be great and meaningful outreach. And I think a lot of the time, our best success with conservative groups will be local conservatives who see that their communities or their states don't have the resources necessary to solve the affordable housing problem and want to see a federal solution. I think also we'll find a lot of success with groups that have a bit of a libertarian mindset, similar to the Cato Institute, because what they'll see is that this is a heavy federal subsidy to specifically the MID to a group of people that generally doesn't require a subsidy. So I think we can find some overlap there. Regarding communities of faith, I think the best messaging can be that there are a lot of pressures on congregations and local faith communities to provide more and more charitable giving because we see increasing homelessness and increasing cost burden and need for eviction prevention resources and so forth. We do have, amongst our 2,310 endorsers throughout the country, numerous local religious organizations, as well as some national religious organizations. The United Methodist Church Global Board on Church and Society, for example, the Zavarian Brothers, for example, are another group. Network, National Catholic Social Justice Lobby. Now, many of these are religious organizations with a specific social justice mission, and those will often be the easier organizations for us to approach about this issue. But we should also consider faith organizations and local congregations that maybe don't have social justice as part of their mission, but are seeing more and more of their community and their congregants dealing with rent burdens. So I think there's a lot of partnership to be made there, and I'd be happy to explore more of that with anyone on the call.
Great, thank you, Joey. One question we have is, should we be focusing on more R's or D's?
Yeah, so we need both. We need everyone we can get. I think, so as I've been having conversations about this with people on the Hill and with members, I find that when we talk about the need to direct scarce resources towards those with the greatest need, that resonates with Republicans, where they're saying, if we're going to be spending tax dollars anywhere, let's spend it on the people who actually need it. The Democrats are going to be the ones, I think, who would be really stepping up to champion that if changes are made, the dollars need to stay within programs that serve those families and that assist the lowest income people. The tax, of course, we're in an environment now where the Republicans are in the White House and in the majority in the House and in the Senate. There's still a big open question on tax reform, specifically about whether the Republicans are going to seek to do it in a bipartisan way, or whether they're going to use a parliamentary procedure called reconciliation, which ensures that they don't have to do it in a bipartisan way. I think depending on which way we go, we'll have different tactics to reach our goal in terms of who we're reaching out to champion. But we certainly need Republicans who are willing to make this change, and we need Democrats to continue championing the programs that we want to see funded through it. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, this is Paul Keeley. I'm the COO at the Coalition. Just to add one little point about this R&D question, one of the facts that you ought to keep in mind and certainly share is that the vast majority of mortgages over $500,000 are actually in blue states, not in red states. The percentages, most red states, of mortgages over $500,000 are under 3% of the mortgages, under 2% of the mortgages, under 1% of the mortgages in many of those states. So one question is, why are we subsidizing high mortgages in blue states? You could ask that of your red Republican colleagues.
Great, thank you, Paul. We have one last question from Stephen. Stephen, forgive me, I'm paraphrasing your question a bit. But what role has discrimination played in MID, and how does MID interact with issues of race and equity?
Well, I mean, so, we just did a report on this last year or the year before where, white homeowners or white mortgage applicants are far more likely to apply for and obtain a mortgage that's over $500,000 than other racial groups. So there's that. If you look at home ownership rates as well as income and the size of homes being bought, white homeowners benefit much more. You could make an educated assumption that white homeowners benefit more from MID than other racial groups based on income, the size of homes being bought. And so, when you look at that, it's a tax expenditure that benefits a particular race more than other races. Where the tax credit, where the tax credit, where you have more lower to moderate income households that would benefit from the tax credit, that makes it more fair than the interest deduction.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that the mortgage introduction increases inequality, both economic and racial. That's it. Okay. Did you have
those are only questions.
Great. Wow, look at that. It's 2:59, right on time, and we got through all the questions. Thanks again, everybody, so much for joining us for this and for sticking with us for this long throughout the United for Homes campaign. I really am genuinely excited about this moment and the opportunities that it offers us, and really believe that if we keep working at it and working to expand our coalitions and get our message out there, that we have a real opportunity to really increase investments into the programs that we know are needed to end homelessness and housing poverty. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your commitment. Thanks for being on today, and we'll look forward to talking with you again next month for our next call on February 8th. And you'll hear from us certainly much sooner than that, especially around Mr. Ellison's Dear Colleague letter, and we'll send you some information on we'll send you the letter, we'll send you some background on it, and real specifics about what action you can take today to keep this campaign moving. So thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.